Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome aboard. Nice to see you. Hopefully you're there. Hopefully you're joining me as we speak. I am live from my office here in not so sunny California today. Glad that it's the end of the week. Next week I will not be doing any of these talks. I am taking a week off. The whole week I'll be taking off, so don't plan on joining me any day next week. It's going to be one of those times when I am just literally going to switch off, not be on Facebook, or possibly not be on Facebook at all. Certainly not on my phone very much at all. Planning to take a week off to give myself some love, give my partner some love who's coming into town, and who I haven't seen since the beginning of this whole COVID thing. So, and my daughter arrives back from England after having finished her degree. She will be returning on June 4th. So next week's a busy week for me, so I won't be here. But thank you anyway for joining me today. Today's kind of chat was really just about love, kindness, compassion, things that I feel like a lot of us have, but society as a whole is missing in many respects. It's really difficult right now. We've had this whole COVID thing where, a lot of people really cared what was happening, and cared for each other. We went out of our comfort zone, and we stayed home. We sheltered in place. We did what we were asked to do by our local officials, governments. We took care to try and protect the most vulnerable in our society, and that's been a really nice thing. It's been a really amazing thing, from my perspective, to have a society that really does actually care, that we show compassion for each other and love and kindness for each other. And then, of course, we've kind of opened back up, and it's business as usual, right? We have minorities being targeted unfairly and unnecessarily. We have a situation where black people are fearing for their lives from the police again, and we hardly heard any of that during COVID because there weren't that many people out and about, and now all of a sudden it's like literally we're having riots because of it. And it's as a society, as an individual, as part of this society, I realize that most people think with their ego-centered fear and smallness that ego brings, right? It's fearful, it's afraid of the other, it's the unknown, it's not what I'm used to, and therefore it's really uncomfortable for me. But if we can change that, if we can drop from our head to our heart, right, and truly be heart-centered, right, and that's a really difficult thing to do if you're if you're scared, if you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're if you're stressed out, if you're if you're grieving. Even the ego is a protective part of our brains that really shuts us off to a lot of the the real feelings that we can sense for others, if we're unwilling to sort of break free from that fear and that anxiety that the ego kind of feeds. From my perspective, that's how I was for a long time. After Suzanne died, probably at least a year, and it was scary, to live like that, to feel like that all the time. And then I chose to really take a look at what it was that my ego was doing to me, and what it was that I was doing to myself as a result. And I chose to take a really, really, really difficult journey from my head to my heart. And once I actually discovered the feeling, the sensation of what it really truly meant to be heart-centered and to lead with my heart, it became a completely different approach to life and to people. And yeah, I really do feel for all of these people who are protesting right now, all of the people all over the country who are outraged by this, senseless death, really. And I also, understand that, there are individuals out there who are just not equipped to really understand the nature of their own actions. And as a result of that, when we don't understand what we're doing, when we're not conscious, right? We're acting out of ego, and we're acting out of our sort of croc brain, our fight, flight, freeze, fawn modes. We're really not doing ourselves or the world any favors. Which is why I wanted to talk about that today, because I really feel like we have an opportunity, and my whole objective here is to spread this message, to say, hey, look, let's be more loving, let's be more kind, let's be more compassionate, let's be more empathetic to those who are different from us, right? And the only way that we can do that is to really take that deep dive. Hi, Cameron. Nice to see you. Thank you. I really appreciate you watching today and participating. So like I said, if we can take that deep dive from our head to our heart, really get down into our heart and lead with that, right? Let our heart be the piece of that puzzle that really, really, puts us forward, right? With love and with kindness and compassion and empathy and all of the positive things that we can do. I really feel like that is the only way that we as a society can change, right? I think back to there's a great photograph. I don't know if everybody has seen it. It's from the 60s, and I can't remember whether it was at Kent State University before before the students were all shot by the National Guard there or not. But there was this photograph of a hippie putting a flower in the end of a gun that a soldier is holding, right? And really, that's what we need again. We need to rediscover that bit of America, right? Of our society that would put the flower in the end of the gun rather than the one who will pull the trigger of the gun, right? That's what I think we need to find. And that to me is a metaphor for where we are now. I think we've gone backwards, but one of the things that I was talking about with Christy, who's coming out this week, thankfully, finally, I'm going to get to see her again first time since March. I said, maybe this is that point where the pendulum has finally stopped swinging backwards, and now we're going to start seeing progress forwards, because I really feel like this pendulum in our country has swung so far to the negative side of things, and this pandemic has only reinforced that and really forced people to sort of examine their own perspectives. And some people have reacted really, really negatively to it, and other people have acted really, really positively to it. And it seems like it's become a political divide between those who've reacted badly and those who've reacted well. But it isn't really a political thing at all. It's a human thing, right? it's the nature of, you know, the scared, fearful, ego-driven person versus the heart-centered, loving, kind person that I really feel, you know, we need to kind of focus on, right? It's not political at all. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with how we approach our lives and how we approach our own fears and anxieties. And if we can choose, right, to live from the heart. Hey, Will, nice to see you. Glad you could make it. Hope you're all right. If we can choose to live from our heart, right, then that would be amazing, right? Because if we're living from our heart instead of from our head and our ego, right, we aren't going to be fearful of, you know, other people, or we're not going to be fearful of, you know, staying at home a little bit longer because we can't get a, you know, because we you know, we can't go out and potentially infect other people, right? We're going to care that we are doing that, right? You know, there was a video that I saw not long ago where they were interviewing a man, and I may have mentioned this before, but they were interviewing a man who said, they asked him, how many people would you be willing to sacrifice, you know, to reopen the economy, right? To restart the economy. How many people, right? And he said, oh, I don't know, you know, 70, 100, you know, 1,000, who knows, you know, how many people could we sacrifice to reopen the economy? Anyway, well, they said, well, okay, let's take your example of 70 people. And they brought out 70 people right in front of him and showed him what 70 people were. And those 70 people were his entire family, right? And when we put into perspective, a real perspective, what it truly means, right, to sacrifice somebody for the sake of our economy or whatever it may be, right? You know, then we really have to kind of think carefully and listen to our hearts, not our heads, right? You know, I'm naive. Maybe I'm being silly or even, you know, fantastical, thinking that we could potentially have some sort of a, you know, a reawakening as a country and move that pendulum more towards love and kindness, right? You know, in the 60s we had imperfect humans in the Kennedys and Martin Luther King, and we ended up with Nixon, right? By 68. And you know, it's one of these things where, you know, you had this huge disparity between what happened at the beginning in the middle of the 60s, where we had this civil rights movement where it was, you know, completely, you know, peace, love, and all of that, and then the hippie movement and all that, and then you have Nixon on the other end, right? and then the Watergate and all of these scandals and things like that, and it's like, oh God, are we doing this again? Are we repeating history again? And you know, and I'm not saying that just politically, I'm talking about as a society, right? We had this really huge chasm between the sort of the hippie movement and the regular kind of Joes in society, right? You know, your sort of working stiffs that, you know, were working for IBM or the Man or whoever, you know, that you want to call it, right? So you had all of that during the 60s, and here we are 55 years later, 60 years later, and I'm seeing, you know, and I studied history, so I see, you know, I see things in perspective of what came before us, what lessons could we have learned from those periods of time before us, that, you know, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, what are we going to repeat, what can we avoid repeating, right? And you know, from my perspective is, you know, the 70s and 80s were a reaction to the 60s, and it took us until, you know, the 90s and 2000s to kind of swing one way, and now we've swung back the other way. And I think that, you know, as human beings, as a society, we have the collective capability of, you know, being more kind and more caring and more considerate and compassionate and understanding of each other. Yet oftentimes we choose not to. We choose to think and focus simply on ourself and on our immediate sort of short-term needs. And that's human nature, it's survival. It's survivalism, really. And I find that, a lot of times that, that we have this perception that, because we want to survive, we want to, defend ourself, right? That we have to forsake others in the process of doing that. When nothing could be further from the truth. As a collective, I mean, we came together as a collective society over time, thousands and thousands of years ago, heck, even possibly upwards of millions of years ago, to create civilizations, communities, and tribes that, helped each other and defended each other and worked with each other. I've quoted, Margaret Mead a couple of times, the noted anthropologist, that she said that society as we know it, right, civilization as we know it, really, really started in a time when a tribesman or tribesperson was cared for with a broken leg, right? The leg was so badly broken, but it had mended, right? And they found this bone, or these bones of this, ancient human ancestor. And to her, that was the moment that civilization was born, because as a tribe, right, historically, they would have just left that person to die, right? That person would have just been, abandoned. Now, you have a tribe that's caring and concerned for this individual and takes care of that individual while that person's leg mends and becomes, whole again, and they can walk again, assuming that they can, or could. And that meant that the society that person was part of, the tribe, the civilized tribe, was caring and compassionate enough for that person that they looked after him or her until they were well enough to look after themselves. And, that to me is what, I agree with Margaret Mead that was a really defining moment in terms of human evolution and as a society, or as we became a society, really. So, from that perspective, here we are, and yet we're still, have this antagonism between the push of, can we be loving, kind, and compassionate with each other, versus the pull of, I need to look after myself, I need to look after my own family and be, and make sure that we eat and we survive. And, I have I have conflicting views on these sorts of things, right? In terms of what the real solutions might be for us as a society. But the reality is that if we actually simply get out of our own heads, right, and live from our hearts, and we are living with loving kindness, with compassion, with empathy, with sympathy even, for the plight of others, right? Understanding, trying to, empathy is trying to actually put yourself in someone else's shoes, feel what they may be feeling, and understand what they may be feeling at any one time, right? That's what empathy is all about. Now, I can completely empathize with both sides of this argument, right? With this push and pull, I want more loving kindness and compassion in the world, and I need to feed my family, so I need to get back to work, and I don't care about, what sacrifices are being made for this society, right? So, I can understand both of those perspectives, and I can empathize with both of those perspectives. But what I really believe is that there must be a happy medium somewhere. I really, truly believe that. And, how do we get there? How do we get to that point? And I only think that we can do that by dropping out of our heads, leading from our hearts, being very conscious of what it is that we're doing instead of being on autopilot and just, doing things business as usual, right? One of the hardest things to fathom is how the economic disparity in this country has grown. Even during the pandemic, it's grown. 40 million people unemployed, yet the nation's top billionaires increased their wealth by $434 billion. It's like, well, how does that work? How does that work that these people increase their wealth so tremendously during a period when the economy has really tanked? Okay, I mean, this is what everybody keeps telling me is, oh, well, the economy is tanked and everybody's messed up. Well, no, these guys made more money during the pandemic than, 60% of the country make it ever, ever combined. So it's like, okay, well, hang on a second. So how do we as a collective, how do we as a conscious collective, and I think we can be a conscious collective. I mean, I'm not talking about obtuse, like woo-woo stuff here. If we can really consciously think and believe that, that this can change, that we can change as a society, then we can, right? We can do better. One of the reasons why I started these talks now 9 weeks ago was because I wanted to share about, my thoughts around all sorts of different issues. And, it started with what do you do, when you're working from home? How do you feel? How do you sense what you're feeling and manage your emotions and your anxieties and your fears? And now we're opening back up. We're having even more anxious anxiety, fears and whatnot, because this is it's a scary time. We don't know whether this is gonna come back and bite us in the butt because we're opening up too soon. There's already hot spots developing, and but the question that we have to face is, well, what is it that we truly want as a society, as as human beings? Do we want the comfort of the material things and the lives that we lead, and the 40-hour-a-week job that we've got that pays for our medical care and our pensions and all of that? Or do we want a society that's just and fair and, compassionate and kind and loving? I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't, right? But we as a collective, right, as a conscious collective, need to kind of figure it out. And we also need to hold ourselves accountable, right, for our own actions, and for our own thoughts. Oftentimes our negative thoughts about things that are happening around the world and all of this, will influence how we feel in any one moment, right? And we have control over how we feel. We have control over our thoughts. It was amazing for me to read. I saw a meme yesterday, and this was on LinkedIn of all places. And LinkedIn is usually not the kind of place that has these kinds of memes, but it said, let's shut down the mainstream media for 30 days and see how many of the world's problems go away. And I looked at that and I thought, right. So if we bury our heads in the sand and pretend that the news that we see doesn't exist, right, that means it doesn't exist, right? I don't think that's logical, and I think that that's a bit of a fallacy, right? Just because the news is reporting that we have COVID-19, and I know that people have said this before, that because the news is reporting it, that's why it's there, right? If the news hadn't reported it, we would never have known and it would never have existed. No, it would have existed still, and it would have killed more and more people because, unfortunately, without knowing that it exists, it spreads a lot faster. Without stopping the virus, without sheltering in place, without staying socially distant, without doing all of these things that we've been advised to do, the virus would have spread a lot more. Yeah, a lot more people would have been asymptomatic. Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of healthy people out there who would have been asymptomatic and would have been fine, right? Who would have got it. But there's also a lot of people out there who wouldn't have been asymptomatic, and there would have been a lot more people who would have died. The data modeling and all of this stuff that everybody's been complaining about, oh, it's wrong and this and that and the other thing. Well, they're not looking at it from a heart-centered point of view. They're looking at it from an ego-centered point of view. And what they're thinking is that, well, if more people had it, then we'd build this herd mentality, this herd immunity, and we'd be able to, nip it in the bud faster. Maybe. We don't know how this virus mutates, or how it changes, or how it affects each individual differently, right? The list of symptoms started at 3 or 4, right? Now it's like 30. Okay, so as things have evolved, so has the understanding. We need to let science catch up with reality, and that's what this whole sheltering in place piece has all been about. And our egos are sort of saying, well, gosh, why do we have to keep sheltering in place when there doesn't seem to be much spread and the curve's been flattened and all of this? Well, there's still people walking around out there with this virus who are still spreading it. And if that happens, and you may be the picture of health today, tomorrow you could be, on a ventilator because you don't know that you have an underlying condition, not been to the doctor recently, you don't know what's going on in your body, and you end up on a ventilator because you've been exposed to somebody who was asymptomatic. That's what we're trying to prevent. That's what being heart-centered is all about, rather than ego-centered, right? Being heart-centered means that we care about what happens to other people. I mean, I could conceivably have had this virus back in March. I could have got it when I was flying back and forth to Kansas City. I could have easily been exposed to it, right? But I chose to avoid contact with other people as much as I possibly could over these last couple of months, simply to make sure that if I was carrying it and was asymptomatic, I didn't give it to anyone else. That's what being a kind, caring, loving, compassionate person is all about, right? And that's really where I thought, today I would just talk about how we as a society really need to find that in and of ourselves and use it, use that power that we have as a collective to dive deep, get out of our heads and into our hearts, and choose to live from a place of loving kindness and compassion and understanding. And when we choose to do that, we do create a butterfly and ripple effect, as it were, and make the world a better place, right? The more people who are consciously living from their heart rather than from their head will change the way that our society behaves. It just happens. Right? Like I said, it's a pendulum, and we have swung way over here to the really negative, really constantly griping, living from our ego side. And I feel that it's time that, if we as a group can wake up and start living from our hearts instead, bang, we start swinging that pendulum back to where, we become a better society. It's almost like a slingshot where, we're kind of being pulled back into the negative, and then bang, hopefully we just fly forward into the positive and really, have this a major breakthrough as a society and become a kinder, more gentler, loving society. But, are we going to get there overnight? No. It's going to take years, if not decades, for this society to truly, truly change. And And I will go out on a limb here, and I will be controversial, and I say that the sooner that we have more women in power, because women actually are more comfortable with living from their hearts than men are in most cases, the sooner we will be a more kinder, gentler, caring, compassionate society. I mean, if you look at the countries where their leaders are women, New Zealand, Germany, etc., the societies are doing far better than the United States. They've handled this whole pandemic situation far better than the United States. And, it's common sense as far as I'm concerned. The sacred feminine, as they call it in the ancient texts, the Mayan and even other native cultures, is so important for us to get back in touch with, and we, particularly the United States in the present day, have lost that. We have lost touch with the sacred feminine, and that is something that we really need to rediscover in order to live from our hearts and live from a place of compassion, kindness, understanding, and empathy. So anyway, so next week, no broadcasts, none whatsoever. I am taking a week off. Christy, nice to see you join me and are watching. Christy is coming out for a visit, and I am really excited about it. So I am going to be not doing these talks all next week, so that I can entertain and do other things. So anyway, thank you all for joining me today. I think I'm just up on my time now, and I will see you maybe, if not the 8th of June, which is a possibility. I might not be there on that Monday, but the 9th of June for sure, I'll be back. All right, and thank you all very kindly for joining me. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you interacting with me, and much love to you all, and I wish you a wonderful weekend, great rest of your Friday, wherever you may be. All right, and I look forward to seeing you probably June 9th. Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great week next week.